Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast. This series introduces you to coaches and consultants who work with leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and professionals to create their best lives and achieve and perform at their full potential. Our guest today is Tony Marr. Tony is a master storyteller with over 20 years of experience helping organizations and leaders understand and communicate their stories. His work spans from captivating audiences with tales of humor, hope, and history to helping organizations discover their personal and corporate narratives to clarify their mission, values, and strategy. During today's episode, we're going to learn about Tony's process for helping organizations discover and articulate their story. Tony's going to be sharing some examples of where his storytelling expertise has also had an impact on the organizations he's working with. And we're also going to discuss some of the common challenges organizations face when communicating their mission, vision, and values, and what they can do to overcome them. Tony, it's a pleasure to have you on the Success Insight podcast and the Coaching and Consulting Insight series. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Howard. It's great to be talking to you again.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, I had the pleasure of meeting Tony. It was literally about a month ago when I was at a conference in beautiful Northeast Tennessee. It was in Jonesboro. And Tony, you were would I say you were like the keynote speaker? Were you the entertainer? You were more than an entertainer.
I was the evening entertainment. I think
you were the evening entertainment. And I loved it. And it was Jonesboro, Tennessee was beautiful, and the storytelling facility. And you were up on stage. And for our listeners, I discovered right then and there, Tony was originally born and raised in Las Vegas. And so I just had to go to him. Here's a 60-some-year-old guy running to this. I don't know Tony, you look like you're about 35, but I know you're probably a little bit older.
Quite a bit older than that, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I'm running up to you thinking, hey, I'm from Las Vegas. And there you have it. Here you are. So welcome again. I would love if you would, for our listeners, just share a little bit about yourself and how you made it from Las Vegas out to Tennessee, and tell us a little bit about storytelling.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Las Vegas, stayed there for the vast majority of my life, had one brief little stint in middle school in Southern California, but then our family moved right back to Las Vegas after just a few short months there. And when I graduated from high school, I came to East Tennessee to play basketball at a small liberal arts college here in East Tennessee. And I hated it, hated every second of it. The culture shock was just far beyond anything. I felt like I was a foreign exchange student for 4 years. And as soon as I graduated, I moved back to Las Vegas. And I couldn't wait to get back out west, back to the desert. And it took about 6-8 months before it hit me that those trees were pretty nice. Grass that you didn't have to have a sprinkler system to care for was pretty nice. And those Southern people were pretty kind. And so it took me about 5 more years to move back to East Tennessee for good. And I've been here since 2005 full time and really, really loving it. For the first close to 15 years of my professional career, I was in vocational ministry. I was a pastor in churches both in Las Vegas and here in Tennessee. And through that process, I wanted to become a better communicator. And so East Tennessee State University, that's here in Johnson City, Tennessee, actually has a master's program in storytelling. And I think it's one of only 2 in the world that it's a legitimate Master of Arts in storytelling. And so being right here in my backyard, I applied for that program, got into that program, took the very long path of completing that program. And through that, my goal in that was just to become a better communicator. But through that, fell in love with the art and the craft and the history of story. And it really began to expand my horizons. In 2006, I started a consulting group with 2 other gentlemen. And through that process of working with many, many nonprofit organizations, and then immersing myself into this world of storytelling, I began to really see a correlation between the story structure that was taking place in a lot of the creating and crafting and just background of what story is and what it means, not just to an oral presentation, but also to cultures that every culture is defined by their story. And I began to look at how our story affects our organizations. And so many organizations have a mission statement or a vision statement, but it really doesn't tell their customer or consumer the what they're really about and what is in it for them. Why would anyone want to work with them? And so we began working and kind of vision crafting what would a program look like to help organizations discover, craft, and tell their corporate story. And it's really been an enjoyable process in helping different organizations and leaders discover that process.
Wow. And thank you for sharing that. And I would love to circle back to a couple things you shared. One is I had learned when I was in Johnson City and seeing East Tennessee State University, I hadn't not even known that there are storytelling programs. And this idea of going to school and learning this craft, and you originally had this idea of going into the vocational ministry. And how did you is was this the kind of like the grounding of this program to send people out into ministry, or was it much more you could have have a kind of a sweet spot within that program?
Yeah, no, the storytelling program at ETSU is not uh, religious based in any kind of way.
Okay.
In fact, it was kind of a shock for me because the where I did my undergrad was a Christian liberal arts college, and so
Okay.
everything there was very focused on faith, and even courses that had nothing to do with faith. The professors and the faculty and staff are very faith based and faith driven, and
Mhm.
so then many years later in life as a full-fledged adult starting back into higher education at a state school was it took some getting used to the language used by the professors and it wasn't anything that I had experienced in my undergrad before. So it's definitely
Mhm.
not faith-based. The
Okay.
program at ETSU, for anyone that would be interested in it, is it is very much an intellectual program. When the program was first started, it was much more focused on the performance of story. And
Mhm.
so a lot more with the oral traditions of story and performance based aspects. Now it really is much more of a educational and intellectual program. It's more with the theory of story, story composition, the history of story, what story means to communities. And yeah, definitely not as much. It still has some performance based stuff. So if you are a public speaker and you wanted to get better at your craft, it would definitely help you with that. But it
Mhm.
also is very, very instructional and informative for someone who is an author, a writer, and just wants to understand humanity a bit better.
Okay. Okay. I want to touch back to faith just for one more uh, tangent, and the reason is growing up, I spent a lot of time with rabbis. And when I was paying my way through school, undergrad, graduate school, I was a photographer, and I spent a lot of time with clergy from a lot of different faiths. And they, all of them collectively, I would say, were some of the best storytellers I had ever heard. And now you have this in hearing about your journey and going to ETSU. Who were some of your inspirational icons that you kind of drew from to become this consummate storyteller?
Yeah, for me, it would have to start with my dad.
Okay.
Was as a young boy every night sitting on the edge of my bed pulling out a storybook, and some of our favorites were Brer Bear and Brer Rabbit, and he had a different voice for every character, and I found out later that most of the time he wasn't even reading from the book, that it
Uh,
was stories that he was conjuring up in his head, and the story would continue from night to night, and if there was a night that something was getting in the way. There was no stopping me, that I had to hear that story. And then from that, it went on that I did grow up in the church, and my family was very involved in church there in Las Vegas, and we were one of those families that was there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. My dad was a leader in the church, and so we had the in Sunday school class growing up, you had the flannel graph, and seeing the Sunday school teachers bring the stories of Scripture to life on this blue felt board that with these little stick-on characters that we were on a budget, and so we only had 3 or 4 characters, and so they all had to play multiple roles in the story, and that was where my love for story really grew. And then throughout middle school, high school, adolescence, it was the voice of Vin Scully, that the longtime play-by-play announcer for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Every night there in Las Vegas, listening to 570 AM and the Dodger games on my little transistor radio that sat on my nightstand, and hearing Vin Scully through radio paint a picture that I felt like I was right there in Dodger Stadium, that I was watching the game take place. He was a masterful storyteller, and the way that he could communicate through spoken word and create a picture in your mind was something unlike anyone that I've ever heard, and just brilliant at his craft. And so you combine all of that along with some great other mentors and people involved in my life, that just something that I was really drawn to, I think, from a very young age.
Oh, that's very cool. And I love, how you mentioned your dad and then you went on to Vince Scully. In one of the other podcasts that I run, the Outdoor Adventure series, I will often ask my guest, how did you get started in this love of whatever the outdoor sport was, fishing, hunting, hiking? And I love when I hear it was my dad, it was my uncle, my grandfather, my mom, aunt, and because it's special when our parents they're taking care of us. We're learning from them, but
Yeah,
they also have this gift that it stays with us for the rest of our lives and what we
absolutely.
appreciate. I love
And
that.
and what I'm doing now with the corporate storytelling and the consulting is really because of my dad. That his profession growing up, he was considered for about 30 years as the expert in the world really on alcohol and drug addiction and
Mhm.
treatment.
Okay.
He established all over the world what's now a program that is done in countries, just about every state in the United States, and more countries than I would know. That's a court program. That anytime
Mhm.
you would get arrested on a misdemeanor or felony drug offense, you could either go to prison or you could go to my dad's program.
Oh,
And
wow.
he started it right there in Clark County in southern Nevada, and then moved out throughout the state of Nevada and got them set in California and Arizona. And then he was traveling all over the world, consulting with government agencies and helping them to develop these programs. And through that, he was hired by the United States federal government in the 80s to create a temperament and personality system.
Mhm.
Then was contracted by the government to go and help other government agencies do this with their teams. And and so it was in 2005 that we were looking at the things that my dad was doing for government agencies all over the world, and said, why can't we do this for nonprofits? And so we
Mhm.
started our own nonprofit consulting agency that was doing this with nonprofits. And then you fast forward 3, 5 years later, that the love and training and education and story came place, and we blended the 2 together. And so
Mhm.
it was really great. So a lot of the foundational things that I do with leaders and their companies come from the stuff that my dad was creating and doing all over the world in the 80s and 90s.
I love hearing that. I just love hearing that. My dad left us when I was very young, and my mom, may she rest in peace, was always just working, 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 taking care of us. And and I love that. And it's so important to have those role models in our life that we can kind of take that gift and it stays with us. As you began to work with organizations, how did you pitch them or did they come to you because of how you were, say, marketing, or they saw you perform, or they heard about you? Where did this meeting come together, and how did you discover what they needed, and what kind of questions did they ask you? Like, Tony, how can you help us?
Yeah, in full transparency, I am not good at marketing in any way. I'm not good at marketing in really any of the endeavors that I'm a part of. And so I haven't done any marketing when it comes to that aspect of things. It's all been from I'll work with one group and someone in that group will say, "Hey, I'm a part of this group. We'd love to have you come and do this with us." Or they'll see me somewhere and hear me talk. And it's all just really been word of mouth. My my process when someone wants to engage in a conversation, the first thing I ever ask is, "Tell me your story,"
Mhm.
and we can go a long ways just off of that. That most of the time, many times, like I said earlier, their story is simply just reciting a mission statement that's 10 to 15 words, and I say, "Well, that's not a story. That's a statement. Tell me your story," and then if they can articulate that pretty well, I said, "Now tell me the story of your target audience. What's their
Mhm.
story?" And if they can't tell me that, then I know that we've got a groundwork to start from.
And is the story that they're sharing, how comfortable are they giving that out to you or sharing that out with you? Because so much of our psychology is essentially kind of protecting ourselves. We don't things we don't want to share, or there's a limiting belief that it's just not important. So how do you help the organization, or say the individual in the organization, really get deep inside what's really going on? What is it that's so important to share, rather than helping them stay safe? Because in storytelling, you don't want to be safe. You
Yeah.
want to draw that out from whoever your client is, the organization or the individual. How do you help them be safe, but also willing to be vulnerable, get
Yeah.
naked, so to speak?
I'm not afraid of silence. And silence can be very awkward, and silence doesn't scare me. And so there are a lot of times when I will pose a question to someone and they'll just stare at me blankly. And I'm not afraid of the silence. We can sit there for a while. And it's amazing how oftentimes enough silence, enough awkward silence, then they'll open their mouths and begin to speak. And let's just get down to the basic bare roots of it.
Mhm.
If I'm working with an organization, why did you wanna start this company? What was the heart behind it? What happened? When did you first fall in love with the product or the customer or the idea, the service? And we just building blocks off of something until we can create, till we can really get behind what what the heart is of your organization. And there we start to craft and work on this narrative that you have.
Are there instances where being the client or the individual begin to share and tell their story, where it is much harder for you or harder for them, and it just takes a longer amount of time to draw them out, versus some folks are, I would imagine, they're just like, they're an open book. I'll tell you anything you want to know. Let's just do this. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I think
imagine there's a continuum.
the difficult part really is not in getting people to talk, it's getting them to stop talking. When when it's time to really pare down things, one of the processes that we do when I'm working with a group is when it comes to their values, that we start off with a whiteboard and a marker and I say, let's just list all of the values that you guys have as an organization. And this will spend we'll spend 30 minutes maybe just listing values, and I'm just writing them on the whiteboard. And by the time they're done, we maybe have 30, 40, 50 values, core values, what they would say were core values of their organization.
Mhm.
And then After a brief pause and me telling them to tighten their belts and pull up their socks, I say, okay, pick five. And out of this list of 40, 50 values that you've had, let's pick five that really are critical to who you are and what you're about. And then that process causes many times people to stand up and storm out of the room, uh,
Mm.
because one person will feel, no, this is absolutely critical to who we are. This is core to who we are as an organization and who I am as a human being. And someone else will say, I get that, but we only get five. And so I don't think that's one of the top five. And then you'll get all sorts of great debate. And through that, me sitting back and not being a part of the conversation other than to mark off of values, you really begin to learn a lot about the organizational structure. You begin to learn a lot about really what the root is for the key players in that organization. And that's fun.
As you're helping the organization and the individuals that are around this table or in this room narrow down and select, say, the top five values, what else are you seeing in the dynamics and in the relationships that are going on there? Because I mean, it can be pain. I imagine this can be painful, and people who are not used to sharing, not used to being vulnerable, getting angry. What else are you seeing that's going on in that room?
Yeah, I think what you really see is light bulbs going off all around. That people that have maybe worked for this organization for years didn't realize really what they were behind or what they were working for, a part of. And maybe some of the things that they thought were critical and crucial to the organizational framework were not so important after all. Or maybe things that they had no idea were foundational to this company that they work for, that they've poured so much of their time and effort into, they had no clue about. So you constantly through the process see light bulbs going off and seeing people either getting very excited, which is the goal. You hope that through this process, your people become even more on board, more bought in, invested into the organization that they're working for, and they're giving so much of themselves to. And so I think that's a great process to see.
Okay. What is the outcome of this process that you're taking your clients through, this organization through? And what does that look like? What do they do with this work, this message, these deciding what these values are? What happens next?
Yeah, so our process is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. The first step is to create a picture. We have to get a clear picture of your organization. The way that I explain it to everyone that I work with is if you've ever gone to do family pictures, okay, if you've ever gone, you hire a photographer, and back in my day, we would go to Olin Mills at the Meadows Mall, and
Yeah.
it was we. My mom would go to J.C. Penney, and she would pick out all of our clothes, and we'd all have matching clothes, and then we'd pull into the parking lot of the Meadows Mall, and she would bribe me and my brother with Orange Julius after we were done. If we would go and sit still for just a few minutes at the studio at Olin Mills. Now it's so much more complicated because now you search the internet for hours. I don't, my wife does. She'll search the internet for hours finding the perfect photographer. And then before you even go for your photo session, you go and have a pre-photo session meeting with her. You pick out the location. You help decide what are we going to wear, where are we going to be, how many different locations are we going to meet in a park, are we going to meet in a barn, are we going to meet out in a field, what are we going to do? And then you spend hours upon hours getting ready, especially if you're one of my daughters, getting ready for these pictures. You go out, you spend a couple of hours with this photographer, then you're going to go back afterwards for another session where you're going to go through on a big screen TV in an office somewhere, going to go through all of the different pictures that she took, decide which ones you want. Then my wife's going to look at me and ask me to hand over the credit card, right? And and I'm going to have to take out a second or third mortgage on my house to pay for these pictures. The investment that we put in to this picture, and then maybe a couple of weeks later, a box is going to show up at our house, or we're going to go back into the studio, and the box is going to be opened up, and we're going to walk out from there with this picture that tells the story of a time and a place in our family. And for the rest of our lives, every time we see that picture, it's going to remind us. It's going to tell a story. You know, we've all heard it said, a picture paints 1,000 words. But the problem is, we've now got a huge investment of time, of resources, of money uh, that have gone into this picture that tells this story, but it's just a flimsy piece of paper right now. No one takes that picture that they've put all of that investment into and goes over to their refrigerator and throws a magnet on it. No one takes that picture that they've spent hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars and countless hours going towards, and goes over to their wall and pulls out a stapler and staples it to their wall. No, you now go and you spend even more to give it some structure and some substance and frame it, right? You've got to give it a frame. And so what we do with our process is, the first step is we help you discover what that picture is, what that story is. And we have a long process that we go through with that is actually the acronym of story. And so we help them to discover that story and what all that is with story pathway. It's a whole thing that we probably don't have time to get into, the story pathway. But then after we've helped them to get that story, that picture, then we have to give it some structure and frame it. And so with that, you have the four sides of the frame. You have the mission. What is it that we're doing? The vision. Why are we doing it? The strategy. How are we going to accomplish this? And then the measures. How do we know that we're successful in this? And so that's our process, is you have this story. And then once we have the story, you have to be able to explain and tell the story to your clients, to your prospective customers, whatever that is. And so the end result is, at the end of your time working with me, that you're not only going to have a clear, concise story to tell, but you're also going to be equipped on how to tell it in a variety of different ways to reach a variety of different people, because we all have different personalities, we all have different temperaments, we all have different needs, we all have different desires. And if you only have one story that communicates one message, you're probably missing 75% of your audience.
Okay. Can you share the range of organizations, whether they be for profit, nonprofit, medical, banking, finance, military, education, that you work with? And are some more challenging than others? Are they all about the same? You just meet them, or you just meet them where they're at, and you have this process that you have honed over the years, and you just dive right in. But what do those clients look like from your experience and being in this business, in this profession for so long?
Sure. Yeah. I think that really the process stays the same. Uh, the process is pretty universal to whether or not we're working with a nonprofit organization or we're working with a medical office. If we're working with a group of home builders, a construction company, or we're working with a uh, auto body shop, that the process is pretty much the same. That we want to help you to discover what you're doing, why you're doing it, and communicate that in a way to your potential customers or clients that's going to engage them and reach them in the manner that they want. A great example of that is if you were to sit down and watch the Olympics. Okay. I don't know if you've been watching any of the
Oh yeah.
Olympics. We're watching the Olympics every night in our house. Within a 1 hour time block on NBC's prime time at the Olympics, you can have four different commercials from Ford. Okay. And the first commercial from Ford is going to be of a Mustang that is racing down the street as fast as it can. The next commercial for Ford is going to be of a minivan, and it's a family coming in and the mom getting the kids all ready for school and getting going. The next commercial for Ford is going to be of the F-150 and talking about its durability and its ruggedness. And the next one from Ford is going to be talking about the different safety issues and they have. And so Ford understands that we all have different personalities. And so they have a different story to tell to try to meet the needs and meet the the desires and the passions in the heart of each of the different customers that they're going to be working for. If they simply just did the Mustang commercial over and over and over and over, then the mom who doesn't care about driving a red car fast, she simply just wants to get her kids safe to school. Or the grandfather who simply just needs something reliable to work on the farm and haul his trailer with. He doesn't care about the Mustang. And so it's understanding that they have a different story to tell depending on who the audience is.
Okay. Are you open to sharing confidentiality in place, some of the organizations that you've worked with, and perhaps what those success stories look like?
Sure. Just recently, I went through this whole process and worked with a group of public defenders from the state of Tennessee. The state of Tennessee brought me in to help their public defenders be able to better tell the story of their clients, and that was a really fun. I was nervous going into it because normally I'm working with a business, a set business and now it was a group of people that worked in different offices and different branches in different areas of the state of Tennessee. And had 3 days with them to just sit down and dig through this entire process and really help them to be able to the idea what they wanted to get from it was we want to be able to better represent and tell the stories of our clients that we have as public defenders. And being able to still go through many of the same exact things and saying, but rather than rather than asking them, what's the story of your community? What's the mission, vision, values, strategy, structure for your organization? It was, how can you be asking those questions of your clients? How can you? And so it was almost training them to be consultants for each of their clients. And how do you
Right.
ask these questions to go from simply just defending your client to tell the story of your client, that they all have a story? What is it that got them there? And then exactly what I just told you, understanding that the way that a judge who has a very relational personality versus a judge who has a very intellectual personality versus a jury who has a predominantly executing personality, and using some of the framework and terminology from the Clifton Strengths Finder, which I use a lot in
Okay.
my work. You're going to tell that story of that client a little bit differently, and to see the reaction from from those different individuals in there. Again, it was that moment when they grasp it, when they get it, and they understand that they can be so much more for their clients than what they've been in the past. And the excitement to get back and put this into practice is something that's just incredible. I also just took a nonprofit organization through this entire process not too long ago. And to see the way that they came out of it with the other side with such a clear, and nonprofits spend a lot of time on mission and vision. They
Mhm.
really do. It's something that their board and their directors work on consistently, but really getting beyond just those 10 letters that are put on their brochures that they hand out to people, or that's in the front page of their website, to really getting to why is it that we're doing what we're doing, and how do we know that we're successful in this? How can we not only tell the story of our organization, but how can we tell the story of the people that we're working with, is something that I think is really eye-opening, and life-changing for people.
I love it. I love it. And thank you for sharing that. I am curious. I know from our call that we had before we are here today, recording this episode, I got to know a little bit about you, and I learned a lot, some about you when we were together in Jonesboro. I'm curious about how you are taking this. It's more than a skill. It's a passion. It's a love. And how are you taking this in, how this storytelling? How is it informing some of the other passions that you have in your life? Because I know this business, Tony Marr storytelling, is just one part of the your portfolio. You're also very involved in other nonprofits and also in the community. And also, you have children, off to college and moving, things like that. How are you? How is this love a gift? That's the word I was looking for of storytelling informing other work that you do.
Yeah, I think that it really permeates through everything. It's not just something that I do, but it really is foundational to who I am. And so in everything, I coach high school basketball, and in that, every single practice that I am trying to help my high school boys ages 14 to 18 to be understanding that this is just a chapter in their story and there's a bigger story out there that they're a part of. I do a lot with vacation rentals. I have a company that we have short-term vacation rentals in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And my approach to that is that this vacation for the people who rent my cabins or my condos, that this vacation, we are a part of their story. That this is
Mhm.
something that we want to make this an experience that they are telling, that this is a part of their family story for years to come. And we want to make this, my goal is that where you make money in short-term rentals is when you can get outside of the channel managers, Airbnb and VRBO and booking.com and all that, and get repeat guests that come back and book direct for you to where you're not paying those commissions to those outside
Right.
agents. And to do that, we want our places to be something that they want to come back to year after year, and it becomes part of the tradition and part of the story of their family. And it really does permeate through everything that I do.
Okay. And when you're not working, building a business, and whether it's the rentals or the storytelling and the coaching the basketball, how do you decompress and just breathe and take in the surroundings?
Joe Davis and Oral Hershiser, Dodger baseball. That is 162 days a year. I have, it doesn't matter what time it is here on the East Coast. If it's a game at Dodger Stadium, first pitch doesn't happen until 10 p.m. That is I tell my wife, this is my therapy. Every day I know that Joe Davis and Oral Hershiser are going to be waiting for me at 10:10. And if it is an East Coast game, then it's wonderful because it's going to be at 7:10. And it really is 162 days a year. That is my escape. That is my decompression time.
I love that. And by the way, I do want to thank you as you were sharing at the beginning of this recording, and you mentioned Vince Scully being one of the role models that you had. It immediately brought to mind because I'm of the same age, laying in bed on Detroit, Michigan, with that little handheld transistor radio with Ernie Harwell and Ray Lane, and just that to me was baseball. When you're laying in bed listening to the game, it's a wonderful feeling. I love that.
Yeah, it is. I love baseball. I coach basketball, but I wish that I coached baseball. I was never any good at baseball, but
Yeah,
love it.
excellent. So I am curious, and you've kind of alluded to some of this, but as you look back at your career, some of the decisions you've made, you went out to Tennessee for school. You said, "Well, where am I?" And I remember part of your storytelling at our event in Jonesboro was about the experience. But as you went out there, you went back to Las Vegas, then you made your way back out uh, to Tennessee again. But as you look back on your career and the work that you've done, the paths that you've taken, what's been your aha moment?
I think for me, it's any time that I can help someone on their journey of discovering that their life matters, and that they have purpose beyond just the day-to-day life. We so often go through life just checking things off of our list and going from our alarm clock going off to the moment that we can go to sleep. And when you can help someone to realize that their life can really matter for more than just punching a time clock, that they can really have an impact on the world around them, and that their life can count for something, and helping them along that journey, man, that gives me great energy. That drives me.
I love that. One last question. Is there a book or a quote or just an experience that you've had that you would like to share with our listeners? Because they're all in different places in their life. Some are looking for solutions, some are looking to be enlightened, but and some are looking to learn and just learn something new. What insight would you like to share with them?
Yeah, I told you beforehand that a quote that I have sitting on my computer screen right now, that's my screensaver, is from Maya Angelou. It says, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." And I love that quote. And I think that it's something that I look at to remind me consistently that I feel like one of the big reasons that I am here is to help people unlock that story, to help people discover not only their story, but that they're a part of a bigger story. And so I love that. And again, comes back to the question that you just asked me of finding that your life actually has purpose, your life actually has meaning. And how can we reach in and uncover maybe something that's been lying dormant in you for years and years and unleash that.
I love that. And it reminds me of a statement one of my mentors used to say about our work and the choices we've made about our professions is how dare you not share that? Because you've got that gift. You can't just hide it and pack it away. You have to share it.
Yeah, I had
That's
my daughter who we're taking to college in about a week and a half was having some deep philosophical conversations with her, and she said, "So dad, what is the key to happiness in life?" And I think she expected me to come back and say something like it's faith in Jesus, it's money, it's success in a career. And I've been asked that question many, many times over the course of my life. And my answer is always the same. I said, figure out if you won the lottery, what would you do? What would you do? If you didn't have to work another day in your life, what would you do for free? Figure out what that is, that passion that you have that keeps you staring at the ceiling at 3 o'clock in the morning. What is that thing? And then go and figure out how you can make a living doing that. If you can figure that out, if you can discover what that thing is and then figure out how you can get paid to do it, make a living doing it, I think you're going to be pretty satisfied and content in life.
I love that. I love that. Tony, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Success Inside podcast and our coaching and consulting insight series. If our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places to go?
TonyMarr.com, TonyMarr.com, available on any web browser.
I love it. I love it. And Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you in Jonesboro. And I'm so glad we were able to chat and you were open to being on this podcast and just getting to hear your story again and other pieces of it. I think it's just very grateful for that, and it's inspiring. And I'm sure our listeners are going to be inspired as well. So again, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing.
Excellent. Listen, stay in the line. We're going to do a real quick close, and then you're not going to have a final chat. Okay.
Thanks.
All right, folks. We have just been listening to Tony Marr. He is the consummate storyteller and really helping individuals, organizations really craft, cultivate, nurture, build, whatever adjective you want to use, what their story is, what is their why, their vision, mission, values, and bringing that to life and really helping them understand the power that it has. And I do hope you go out and learn more about Tony and his work. We're going to provide a backlink to his website, tonymarr.com. And I imagine all you have to do is Google him. And you're going to find him somewhere on the. As for us, you can find this episode of the Success Insight podcast on our website, successinsightpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And on Spotify, we have a playlist for the Coaching and Consulting Insight series. And of course, wherever you listen to your podcast, just search for Success Insight Podcast. So Folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. And we look forward to having you join us on a future episode of the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast. Take care now.